everyone, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. I wanted to take a moment to mention that I am doing another Lost Mom ornament and card exchange for the holidays this year. The holidays can be a really lonely time of year, and I wanted to do something to help everyone going through the grief of losing a child to not feel so alone. You can choose to do just an ornament, just a card, or both. And you can choose between just exchanging with one person or with multiple people. So if you're interested, check out the posts on the Journey for Jasmine Instagram and Facebook pages. Today I am speaking with Nicola. She is the founder of the Instagram account Fat Positive Fertility. Her mission is to help end the stigma around people who have bigger bodies and help them successfully reach their goal of having a family. She was diagnosed with PCOS at a young age and was able to get pregnant and have 2 living children. Nicola is a leading voice for fat folks seeking fertility support, bringing a unique, fat-positive perspective to her work as a fertility coach, and she is the author of the groundbreaking book, Fat and Fertile. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Nicola from Fat Positive Fertility on Instagram. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Nicola. I live in the UK. I have 2 kids, 2 boys. I live in the middle of the forest with my husband, my boys, my dog. And yeah, all the work that I do around fertility is specifically for fat folks who want to get pregnant, because they face so much stigma when they're navigating fertility, so much bias, so many extra hurdles, barriers to getting their families. And the whole reason I get up every morning is to try and stop the discrimination that they face when they just want to grow their families.
So what is it that got you into this? Did you face discrimination yourself when you were trying to get pregnant?
So I didn't face direct discrimination when I was trying to get pregnant. I got pregnant very easily, even though when I was diagnosed at 16 with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, the doctor said I'd never get pregnant. So I was expecting it to be really difficult for my teens, my 20s. I didn't think I was ever going to become a parent. But when we just decided that now was the time, it happened for both my pregnancies. And it was really the discrimination I faced in pregnancy that kind of started my journey into doing this kind of support. I was made to feel like I was gonna have this terrible pregnancy where everything was going to go wrong, purely based on the size of my body. They didn't really ask any questions about any other health markers, like everything else was normal. But because of the size of my body, they talked about my weight and made me feel ashamed of my body for lots of my appointments. I was denied birth choices because of the size of my body. And actually, through both my pregnancies, nothing happened. They were completely unremarkable. And it really planted a seed in my brain of well, why was I told this was going to be hard to get pregnant? Why was I told that pregnancy was going to be this really difficult thing? Why are fat people given this story all the time that we shouldn't be wanting to get pregnant? We need to lose weight and everything. And the more I kind of dug in this little hole, the more I realized that it's really not based on evidence, but on bias, discrimination. And yeah, it kind of unraveled so many things for me in terms of my own personal journey around my body as well. Because for so long I'd believed the same thing. So it's been a big journey of discovery to get to the point where I am now around doing this kind of work.
Why is it that you think that doctors seem to focus on this and think that it's like the cause of all medical issues?
And it really is, right? I'm sure we've heard so many stories about have a cold, or it must be because of your size. Everything is blamed on weight. And there's no one easy answer to this question. There are so many layers to this around why we deem fatness to be the worst thing. I'm sure I read something relatively recently that was a study that they did, or a survey, and people would rather lose a limb than be a fat person. That is how we view fat people within our society. And like if you kind of explore, and there are so many more clever people that have done this kind of research than I have, but there's racist roots to it. There's a lot around how Black people who have genetically larger bodies, like it was a way of differentiating when white people wanted to be the position of power. There's a lot of religious roots around it, around like the sins of gluttony and like all of those kind of things. There's a lot of colonial aspect to it around when white colonizers were coming over from Europe and into the Americas and deciding like what was going to be like the white powerful thing to do versus the folks who were there on the land originally. So there's so many origins and roots to why we have this idea of bigger bodies being a more unhealthy thing. But then we have a lot of like medicalization of that. So we have insurance companies coming into medical fields and like finding ways that they can delineate who's going to be the healthy people and who's going to be the unhealthy people. And so much of our medical structures now are built on these assumptions that we've made around fat people. And actually, when you look at the research, a lot of it doesn't stack up. And for a long time, doctors didn't even believe this thing. So it's only when these insurance companies started kind of separating populations out into who can we insure, who we won't insure, that we really got into the idea of using BMI as a barrier to access healthcare.
I never realized like how far back all of this goes.
It's wild. Like when you start to look into like the books, and there's some really good researchers that have done a lot of studies on this. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I think it's called Fearing the Fat Body by Dr. Sabrina Strings. She's done a really good deep dive into like how racism and anti-fat bias are kind of intersected through like society. But yeah, it goes back far, and there are so many layers to this question. But yeah, like the result of all of that history is that we are in a position now where if you're a fat person, it is so much harder to access any form of healthcare, never mind just fertility care.
Which is absolutely ridiculous, you know? I mean, and just because you're so-called fat according to insurance standards, you know, doesn't mean you aren't healthy.
They are completely, you know, different things. And the fact that we are saying that fat, like that you have to have this particular level of health to become a parent is also really problematic. You know, that reeks of ableism, that reeks of this idea that we're like have a hierarchy of humans who are and aren't able to become parents. And I think that really it's a very slippery slope into kind of the topic of eugenics, when you start deciding, you know, you have somebody who's making the decision about who can and can't become parents.
That's really like crazy to think about, but it's true, you know. It's like just such a bigger thing. You know, you just think, you know, of all these people that you hear that, you know, they try to go in and get fertility treatment and they're just told lose some weight and then come back. We won't treat you until you lose weight. And it's like, but what if the problem isn't even related to that? Then you're just wasting time. You know, so we just get older. We just have, you know, more issues pop up. It's just, it doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, it's so common that people hear that from their doctors. Even people where there's like a known male factor, for example, they still can't access the care and the treatment that they need in order to get pregnant because of this arbitrary number that we've set on who does and doesn't access care. It's just every time I talk about this, it's still, yeah, it's so unethical and so unfair. It just, yeah, I can never get over the fact of how unfair it is to people to treat them this way.
Now, do you think that people judge women more than men for this issue, like for being bigger?
It's a really good question. I think there are definitely more barriers to folks who identify as women to access that care. I think because it's not just seen as a fertility issue, it's also seen as a pregnancy issue. So the person who is getting pregnant and being pregnant in their body, by our medical culture, that's seen as riskier as well, being in a bigger body and being pregnant. So I think we have generally more stricter rules around those folks than the sperm producing partners, but it is starting to clamp down. And I think one of the reasons why it's getting harder and harder is because of, also there's often a really big financial reason as well. Like in the UK where I am, we have the NHS, which is amazing, and it is like free at point of access healthcare. But what that does mean is that there's a limited pot of money, and the way that they decide who gets the money is often by whatever means they deem necessary. And for so many people, that is, they're told that they've got to lose weight before they can access care. And it's a very frustrating position for a lot of people to be in, because financially it's very expensive to access fertility care if you can't get it on your insurance, for example. I know for folks in the US, again, there are often constraints on accessing fertility care based on BMI, even through insurance. Even when you're still, paying out of pocket for your insurance or having to pay extras and stuff, there's still limits that you have to kind of hurdles jump over in order to access that care.
I feel like if you're the one paying for it, like,
absolutely, right? How can they say no? But it is because this anti-fat bias is so baked into these healthcare systems. It's almost, people don't even question it. They're just like, no, it either doesn't work, or it's not safe, or we can't have you pregnant in a bigger body. There are so many of these kind of reasons that they use. But actually, when you break them down and look at the reasons and the research behind them, it just does not stand up.
So I know you mentioned that you had PCOS. And I know that, PCOS is often one of those things that goes hand in hand with weight gain and things like that. And, a lot of women with PCOS, it's a real struggle. I mean, I have PCOS as well. And especially as I've gotten older, it gets a lot harder to lose the weight and to,
it really changes, doesn't it, as you get older? Like I've noticed my symptoms changing drastically as I kind of entered my middle phase of life.
Yeah. So do you feel like you got very much information about PCOS when you got the diagnosis?
No, not at all. I got zero information. I think maybe I got a pamphlet if I was lucky. All the doctor told me to do was lose weight and to go on the oral contraceptive pill. That was my treatment. That was it. But this was, given my age, this is 22 years ago now. So I was 16, so I'm 38 now. And that we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the resources that we have available today, and I didn't know anybody else who had it. I knew nothing about it, so it was just a case of trying to do what the doctor said. I was on the pill for a really long time to quote unquote regulate my cycles, which I know now is not what the pill does. But it was, it had a massive impact on me looking back at it now, like my mental health, my self-esteem, like so many things that, the doctor flippantly saying, oh, you'll never get pregnant, this is what you've got, and without having any information or anything to back it up, then it's, I thought it was like something that was wrong with me, that I was broken in some way. And, luckily now I have a lot more information, a lot more belief in my body that it's not broken, that this is, in a way, I feel like it was almost a response and a reaction to dieting and weight loss that I'd done before my diagnosis. Like around that time, it was very low fat diets. And of course, my body was going to respond to that because it was not having the fat that it needed in order to make hormones. Like, it makes sense that my body was using coping strategies that it had in order to support me, keep me safe, keep me alive. And above all, now I'm just very grateful for my body for doing what it needed to do in order to keep me safe.
My story is a little bit similar to yours. I was also diagnosed at 16 and put on birth control and just told, come back when you want to get pregnant. And I'm like, okay, like, I guess I have this. I don't know what this means.
It's wild, isn't it?
It is. And then even, we went through some fertility treatment. Even then, like, they're just like, okay, you have PCOS, so let's just go this route, take these medications. No one ever brought in the diet, the type of exercise you should be doing. Like, nobody brought in any of that information.
And it's really hard because, like, we're not treated as people. Like, we're almost, the PCOS like through our teens and 20s, you know, before we're ready to get pregnant, like our health, our well-being isn't really considered in that PCOS diagnosis. It's only like when you want to have kids that is going to be a problem. But actually, there's so much more going on that we need to support ourselves with PCOS. We're not just baby making machines, like we're human beings who have lives and want to enjoy and appreciate our health and our well-being, you know, just so much more than when you get pregnant. I think that's a real disservice to people to you just, you know, tell them to go away and come back when they're ready to have babies.
I definitely agree. I mean, and no one ever said, you know, that like you could be more at risk for diabetes or, you know, things like this. Like nobody tells you. And those are like, I feel like those are really important things to just be leaving out, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And there's such a huge genetic component to, you know, PCOS, diabetes. And it's only really this year that I've started being a bit more proactive about that kind of healthcare and, you know, getting my blood sugars measured, because it definitely has a strong genetic component in my family. And I know that it's likely eventually that I will get diabetes because, you know, it's the progression of PCOS. It's got a huge genetic component. But nobody else is being proactive about that care. And if I wasn't in the position with where I am with my own knowledge, you know, I wouldn't know. And it feels really wrong that people aren't given the whole information so that they can then make those choices about their own healthcare from a really fully informed perspective.
So where did you go to like start learning about all of this? Like with it, because you know so much, it's hard to just pinpoint one area, but how
Oh,
did you get started
goodness.
on that process?
So I think having my diagnosis of PCOS kind of was definitely like that first thing of like being really interested in hormones. But it wasn't until I was in maybe my mid-20s and I started training as an acupuncturist. So that was like my first kind of thing into holistic health. Like I had another career before that in like more Western medicine. So I was a clinical scientist. And then I decided to train in acupuncture. It was a very big switch. I had it myself. I found it really beneficial for what I needed it for. And that's when I started specializing in fertility, because fertility acupuncture is quite well known as having a really positive impact. And because of my own hormone fertility stuff, I was really drawn to it. And that was about 11, 12 years ago now. And then when I was doing acupuncture, that's when I decided to train as a coach, because I felt like there was so much more I could do in terms of helping folks between sessions rather than just seeing them once a week, giving them other tools that they can use in between times. All this time, though, I was still very much on my own, like dieting roller coaster, still trying to lose weight, still very much not understanding the bigger picture in terms of being a fat person who wants to navigate their health. And it wasn't until my first son was born, so I got pregnant with my first son in about 10 years ago. And it wasn't until he was younger, when he was a baby, that I realized how problematic the way that I talked about my body was, the way I talked about food was. And I really recognized that I didn't want to pass that on to him. I didn't want him to talk about food and his body the same way that I spoke about mine. So that was the kind of trigger point really for me, just decide, no, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I've tried dieting for however many years, it's never worked. And I just don't have the capacity anymore. I just don't want to do it. And then luckily around that time, that was kind of when I was on Instagram for around then is when I joined Instagram. And I found all these other incredible people who were fat and just happy existing in their lives and doing fun stuff. And I was like, wow, what? It just hadn't even occurred to me that I could be fat and happy. Like that just wasn't a thing that went together. I didn't see people who were not losing weight or not trying to lose weight when they were in bigger bodies. So it was just this big shock, and it was very exciting. It was very affronting. It took me my own very big journey to get to a place where I'm happy with my body, but it really opened my eyes to what was possible for myself. And then when I kind of got a little bit more on the footing with it and understanding it a little bit more and understanding a bit about the research around intentional weight loss and how problematic that is and how we don't really have any information about any diets that work over long term, then that's kind of when those two worlds collided, and I realized that a lot of the work that I was doing around fertility was actually really harmful to fat people, like recommending restrictions in food and recommending that they diet in particular ways. You know, I realized how disordered that was around their relationships with food, and how it wasn't helping people. And there was so much stigma, there was so much access to healthcare barriers for fat folks, and that's when I really decided that I needed to shift directions and purely focus on coaching, but for fat folks who struggled to navigate healthcare, who couldn't access the fertility support that they needed, and they needed a different way of being okay in their bodies and it being all right that they're fat whilst they're still trying to navigate getting pregnant.
And you also wrote a book as well, is that right?
Yeah, so that was about 4 years ago now. It's called Fat and Fertile, and it was really important for me to have something out there for people that wasn't just weight loss and dieting, because every other fertility book that I've come across, I'd found, was just, it had a few paragraphs in it, or a chapter about dieting, a chapter about weight loss, and that was it. That was all that was available to people. So I really wanted people to have something that didn't talk about dieting and weight loss. That was a book written for them in their unique situation. So yeah, it definitely needs a rewrite. I'm definitely working on a second edition, but I self-published it. I just wanted to get something out there for people. It's something that I'm really proud of in my business.
And if people wanted to buy that book, where could they get it?
It's on Amazon. Amazon's not my favorite thing in the world, but as a self-published author, it really is the easiest way to get books out there, to get it into people's hands. So yeah, if you're interested in reading it, that's how you can find it.
So when did you start your Instagram account?
So that was 2018, I think. So 5 years ago now. And it started off, you know, when I was doing my acupuncture, I'd started it, and it felt like the thing that we were told that we needed to do. But it really grew quite quickly when I changed direction into a way that I could share resources and research with people, because there's not many people talking about this stuff. There's not many people sharing a lot of the research that I found, that when you read it from like a fat neutral stance, actually doesn't stand up. And like, so many doctors will say things like, oh, well, fertility medications don't work for fat people, and actually the research doesn't show that. Or they say like, oh, well, if you get pregnant in a bigger body, you're going to have pregnancy loss. Actually, the research doesn't support that. So giving people that information so that they can have informed decisions with their healthcare providers, basically just a way of sharing all the insights and things that I found, so that more people can use them to access healthcare, to feel better in their bodies, to know that it's not their fault that they can't get pregnant, or that their body's being blamed for this. It was just a really, really powerful way for me to be able to share that information with the world.
Yeah, I feel like doctors just take, one study that they read, like what you said about fertility medications not working for bigger people, and then they just like run with it because they're like, well, this one study says it, so it must be true, like without further research.
Well, it fits into their narrative of the world. Like the way they view the world is that positive bias, right? They think fat people are unhealthy. That's their view of the world. So as soon as they read that one study, they're like, yeah, this confirms exactly what I already thought I knew, so I'm going to run with it. But actually, going deeper into it, connecting all the puzzle pieces together, like, it is just so different. And actually, some medications like letrozole work better for people in bigger bodies. Things like OHSS, so ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, actually occurs less frequently for folks in bigger bodies. But these like positive correlations we don't talk about, we don't associate with. And yeah, there's just so many ways in which that bias is impacting negatively the folks who are trying to access care.
Well, we can't have those positive things, can we?
It can't be okay to be fat. No, heaven forbid.
How dare you be happy?
I know, it's just so rude.
So do you still do the acupuncture?
So I don't do it anymore. We moved house about 2 years ago now. So we moved areas. I used to live near London in the UK, and we've moved out to the countryside. So when I moved, kind of like, it was just like after the main COVID stuff in the UK, and my practice had kind of like had to open and close and open and close. So it was at a point where it was it would have been a massive effort to kind of restart somewhere new. So I decided instead to focus all of my efforts on, you know, supporting people online, so I can support people globally, because this happens everywhere. This isn't just, you know, just in the UK, like it happens all over the world that people face this discrimination. So it worked well in the end to just be able to focus on one thing for now.
I was going to say I had a really good experience with acupuncture. I did it when I
Yay.
was trying to get pregnant, and you know, obviously with PCOS, I wasn't having like regular cycles. I was having these really long cycles, and I saw like a fertility acupuncturist online. I was like, you know what? I'll give it a chance. You know, thinking this isn't going to work. Oh my gosh!
Try
Like
anything.
it gave me regular cycles, and like, you know, and I was just like, but these are just like sticking needles in me. You know, it's absolutely crazy, but
it makes no sense, but I love it. It's so effective for PCOS. You know, the amount of patients that I had that we were able to regulate their cycles, it just feels like a little bit of magic.
it really did. And you know, even my fertility doctor, I know not the main one I saw, but another one at the practice I had to see. And I mentioned that I had been going to acupuncture, and she was just kind of like, okay, like, you know, if you think that works, okay. I'm like, really?
The thing is, it doesn't matter, right? Like, however it works, whether it is like this tiny energy running through your body or it's placebo effect, if it works, it works, and it has the desired response. And I think that is all that matters. Whatever gets you to where you need to be is absolutely valid.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm like, okay, well, I didn't have cycles, now I do. So that's the only thing I've changed.
Make it make sense.
So have you had to deal with many insensitive comments about your weight?
Not as much anymore. In terms of healthcare, I think the worst one was when I was postpartum with my second child. I was suffering quite a lot with my mental health, and I went to see my doctor after like months of putting it off. I was like, no, I won't go. And I went, and in the end, the main advice that they gave me was to go and join Slimming World. So like join a slimming club, because if I lost weight, I'd feel better about my body, and that would improve my mental health. So yeah, I didn't go back. It was just like,
that sounds like straight out of the 50s or something. Like,
oh, I know. You know? I just wanted to like vomit and have. It just, yeah, it wasn't good. I didn't feel very well heard or understood or supported. But yeah, it made me so cross, because as well, like folks who are postpartum are so vulnerable. You know, your body's been through a massive change. It's given birth to a human, and then now we're telling them, you know, telling people that it's more than appropriate to bounce back and to, you know, lose the baby weight. Like it's gross. It's just horrible.
You're like, yeah, because losing the baby weight will help me get through the anxiety and stress of having a newborn.
Absolutely. And now, you know, what I've come to realize is that I'm probably neurodivergent. So it was not going to impact my mental health anyway. Not that I knew that it would, but yeah, it was a massive failing. And that's probably the worst one. I mean, I had lots of comments in my pregnancy, just, you know, like people making assumptions about my lifestyle and things like that. But I live in quite a rural area now, so I don't even see that many people, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, the way that I handle most of the stuff now is mainly online. So being someone who's visible online in a fat body can be a little bit unsafe sometimes. You know, you do get people who comment, especially if I'm, you know, trying to share my work a lot and trying to put it out there in, you know, press or media or things like that, then you can get a lot of people who decide that they have nothing better in life to do than to come and comment on your posts and say mean things and stuff. And I get a lot better at doing that now. But yeah, it's a steep learning curve on how to kind of protect yourself, and boundaries are key, are very important. But yeah, quick lessons learned.
I know people can be so mean, and I'm like, why are you spending your time doing this? Like, does this make you feel better somehow?
It's just so sad. You know, I just feel very sorry for people who just don't have anything interesting in their life going on, and they feel that they have to spend all their time being mean to other people on the internet. It's just like, what do you have to have happen to you or to have going on in your life for you to deem that to be an interesting or useful way to spend your time?
I know. It's like, I mean, not that I want anything bad happening, but I'm like, I almost hope they do just so it explains why somebody would be like that, because I have a hard time
Yeah,
believing like people are mean just to be mean, you
I know,
know?
me too. It's like, yeah, it's just I just don't get people like that. It's just, yeah, people are strange.
So you mentioned that you were able to get pregnant on your own with PCOS. Did you have to make
Yeah,
any changes for that or anything?
it was pretty wild, to be honest. Like, it was at a point where I was at my biggest weight. I had 100 plus day cycles. I hadn't really done much differently. I mean, at this point in my life, I was doing my acupuncture training. So I was having acupuncture because we were like each other's um, guinea pigs through our training. But yeah, it was a time I did not expect it. I thought it was going to be really hard. I thought it was going to be very long process, but it happened really quickly. And I don't know what I would attribute that to these days. I think it was because I wasn't putting a lot of pressure on myself to start with, because I thought it was going to be so difficult, because I thought it was going to be a really long road. Almost at the beginning, it was like, oh, well, we'll just stop using contraception and for a little bit and see what happens. And I think because I didn't have that pressure on myself at the beginning, that probably helped. But as well, like, I think it's just that bodies can just sometimes get pregnant, and fat bodies are no exception to that. Like, sometimes bodies just do it and sometimes they don't, and that's hard. And yeah, I don't think it was anything special. I don't think I'm special. I think it was just that my body, like, yeah, that it was just a case of it being a thing that my body wanted to do at that time. And that being fat didn't make any difference. It wasn't a negative thing. I don't think it wasn't a positive thing. It was just a neutral thing. And I think because I built it up so long, then it was going to be a negative thing. And yeah, I'd almost taken that pressure off myself because I thought it was never going to happen.
And it happened for you both times?
Yeah, it was really wild. And like, yeah, I still can't explain it now, but it's just, yeah, it given me a lot of confidence in my body and its capability to do things, for sure.
So what kind of advice do you have for those who are navigating like the doctors, treating them differently because of their weight?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really challenging thing to do, because for so many people who are experiencing that, they've often had previous experiences like that with doctors. Like, this won't be anything new. Like you said before, like, as soon as you go to the doctors for anything, it's always put down, to your weight, like whatever's going on. So there's almost that trepidation to go to the doctors because you're almost anticipating that that's what they're going to say. So like my first piece of advice is that don't let that stop you trying. For so many people, they feel like they've got to lose weight, or they've got to go on another diet, or they've got to get to this certain weight or point or milestone before they can even start trying. And yeah, I always tell people, don't be afraid to start trying. Give yourself permission to do that, because we know that time impacts it. We know that time makes a difference, and it's not this cliff that you fall off at 35, at 40, whatever the number is. But we do know that time plays a role. So the sooner that you can start, the better. Like, that's only going to put you in a positive position. And all the stories that you're told about the doctor saying, like, you won't be able to get pregnant until you've lost weight, or it'll be dangerous, like, none of that's based on some solid evidence that we have. This is all just weight bias in action. So give yourself all the information that you need to feel confident in your body, to feel competent, to feel like this is the right decision for you. And I have so many resources on my website and on my Instagram and everything. And then make that decision that it's absolutely okay for you to get pregnant in your size without changing who you are, what you look like, anything. Like, you are going to be an incredible parent just as you are. And then when it comes to like talking to doctors, navigating that situation, it's really just practice. Like, we are not taught how to advocate for ourselves. We're not given those skills when we're younger. And I think that's very intentional, because we don't want people to advocate for themselves in healthcare professional settings. But the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. It's okay if it feels rubbish at first. It's okay if you cry the whole appointment. All you can do is do your best and keep trying. I recommend, I've got this like motto that I use for folks when they're advocating for themselves, and it's prepare and care. So you spend as much time as you're able to prepare for your appointment, giving yourself the best shot at finding a good doctor, at putting boundaries in place with your healthcare provider, at deciding what you want to get out of that appointment, making list of questions and things you want answered, going in with an idea of any tests or treatments that you want. So doing as much of that preparation side as you can, and then after the appointment, caring for yourself as much as it is available to you, because those appointments can be so activating on your nervous system. They can be triggering if you have previous trauma of navigating those difficult situations. So taking good care of yourself, making sure you're able to rest, hydrate, all the comfort foods, all the comfort sitcoms, anything that you need to care for yourself, is really important too. So it's kind of like two sides of the coin. And in the appointment, whatever happens, like your body's going to do what it needs to do. Your brain is going to say all the things it needs to say. And a lot of that is, more difficult to control, but we can control the before and after a bit more. So that's how I like to think about it and how to help people through that.
I think you're so right too, is that, it took me a long time to realize that like I can advocate for myself, that I can ask for, certain tests or certain things that, and some doctors would kind of blow me off, like, you Googled it, like, whatever. So then sometimes I would just go get my own blood work. Let's just find out for myself. But
I think people don't really easily dismiss like Google, but actually when people don't believe you, like for fat people, we're so often dismissed and not believed, labeled as non-compliant. Like Google is really useful. It can give you the information that you need when nobody else can. So I think it's really wrong for people to dismiss the fact that you've Googled something, and your lived experience is so valid and way more valid than anybody else's doctorate, like medical information. So I think people need to honor their lived experience. They know best, your body best, and you just got to keep trying.
Yeah, and I don't think, like, I'm not Googling and then thinking I'm a doctor all of a sudden.
No,
I'm like, I know you're still the doctor. I just want to see, like, maybe we can look at this, or just making a suggestion. I know I'm not the doctor.
Yeah. You should be in charge of your healthcare though, right? Like it is your body. You should be making the calls. You should be calling all the shots. And the doctor is there to give their medical expertise, to give their, what they've learned and what they've seen in clinical practice. But ultimately, you're the one that has to live with the consequences of whatever healthcare decisions that you make. And it should be your choice what treatments, what tests you do, like obviously based with all the information that the doctor can give you. But ultimately, we should have choice. And I didn't even understand this concept of body autonomy until I was, in my late stage of my first pregnancy, and I decided I wanted to have a home birth. And it was only till that point, I was 29, that I even understood that I could say no to a doctor and do my own research and demand better care. So it is just, it still makes me very cross that it took me until I was almost 30 to even understand that I could say no to a doctor. Like, I don't think that's right. I don't think that power dynamic is okay. And we really need to help educate people that they have the power when it comes to those kind of healthcare decisions.
Yeah, it took me a while too to realize that, hey, even if I'm not sure if it's this way in the UK, but I know here, like, if I'm referred to a doctor, I can be like, no, I'm going to switch doctors. I'm going to go see, another doctor because I don't like this one, or I can go get a second opinion, or I can, but for a long time I thought, this is the doctor I have to see because this is who I was referred to. So this is who I have to. And I was like, wait, you don't have to do that. You can leave. It's a choice. You can leave.
And how many of those situations have we put ourselves in and thought we've had just to suck it up and get on with it when we didn't know we had the choice? And I just wish that we taught, and I'm teaching my young people now, but I just wish this was common knowledge, that everybody knew that we had choice in this decision. For most part, obviously, there are people who don't have access to any healthcare, and there are people who are stuck by geography or by financial reasons. But, if you've got a choice, then please use it.
The other thing I love about, Google and just the internet and everything in general, which we've kind of touched on before, is just, being able to read other people's stories and other people's experiences, because I feel like that's how you learn so much, like what worked for this person or what worked for this person. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe I can try that. And there are things that maybe your doctor doesn't know about or wouldn't bring up, but then you have like all of these people that you can learn from.
Yeah, and there's something really healing, I think, about reading other people's stories. It makes it feel like you're not alone, like you're not the only one in the world going through this particular set of circumstances. And although, things will change in people's stories and it won't be identical, there is a real sense of like belonging and not feeling so isolated when you know that somebody else is also experiencing, they can't access healthcare, or they can't get that test or treatment, or they've tried this or they've tried that. And I think, yeah, having that sense of being not alone is really important.
So if people wanted to find out more about your coaching services, where would they go for that?
So I have all the information on my website, which is nicolasalmon.co.uk, but I've also got it all over my Instagram at Fat Positive Fertility. And yeah, so I offer one-to-one stuff, but I also have like lower cost workshops for information that people might want to access. And yeah, and loads of free resources as well on my website and on my Instagram for people to access like information, knowledge that they might need to advocate for themselves at the doctors.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
I don't think so. I would love people who are listening to know that you're absolutely worthy and deserving of accessing care, regardless of how many doctors have told you otherwise. So do the best for yourselves, do what you can, and yeah, go and access the support that you need.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing everything. I mean, I've learned a lot just from this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you today.
Thank you so much, Nicola, for sharing all this amazing information with us. I had actually reached out to her to ask her to come on the show because I thought this was such an important topic to talk about. Just like infertility and loss, weight is another one of those taboo topics. Doctors blame all the problems on it. You can't get pregnant, just lose weight. You keep having pregnancy losses, lose weight. But they don't stop to look at the actual causes of what is going on. They just blame the easiest thing there is to blame. And honestly, I feel like it's a bit of a cop-out. Yes, weight can affect some aspects of your life, but there's so much more going on than just a person's weight. Too much weight doesn't mean you're automatically unhealthy. And on the other hand, being the right weight doesn't mean you're healthy either. I have PCOS as well, and I've heard from so many others with PCOS all the things that have been said to them. That they aren't trying hard enough. They aren't eating right. They aren't exercising right. They need to eat less. And really, doctors don't even understand PCOS. That's why so many of us are just put on birth control and told to come back when we want to get pregnant. I'm just so tired of so many amazing women being made to feel as though they are just not good enough because they don't meet the doctor's standard BMI measurement, which is a standard that shouldn't even be used anymore, honestly. I just want to say, if you're struggling with weight, or if you've been told by a doctor losing weight would solve all your problems, know that you aren't alone. I definitely recommend checking out Nicola's Instagram page at Fat Positive Fertility and seeing all the amazing things that she has posted and all the free resources that she has on there as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Please leave a rating or a review if you love the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.